To many, Switzerland is about chocolate and cheese. Its peaks and idyllic landscapes are postcard perfect. Lesser known to the general public, however, is that Switzerland is also an economic powerhouse, consistently ranking as one of the world's most powerful economies. But it hasn't always been this way. Until the early 20th century, Swiss laborers were some of the lowest paid in Europe. Its workforce was primarily rural, with very few natural resources to help it. What then caused Switzerland to become the powerhouse we know it as today? In order to answer this question, we need to explore its history and how it was formed. Three periods in its history stand out: pre-unification, its policy of neutrality, and the unification in 1848. Switzerland's history can be traced back to the late 13th century, when the founding cantons of Uri, Schwyz, and Unterwalden swore an oath to form a confederation that would be the trigger to unite the rest of the country as we know it today. The momentous occasion would forever be written in the annals of history as the Rütli Oath. This pact was a momentous occasion that marked the birth of the Swiss Confederation. Set in 1291, it tells of representatives from these cantons who gathered secretly on the Rütli Meadow by Lake Lucerne. Swearing an oath of mutual defense, they vowed to resist oppression and preserve their freedom against the mighty Habsburgs. The importance of this pact cannot be overstressed. 13th century Switzerland, like most of Central and Western Europe, was not a culturally united region. The split of the Carolingian Empire brought on localized rivalries and national identities, driven by common religious or linguistic loyalties rather than a grander idea. Moreover, Europe underwent what became known as the frontier movement. Population growth combined with immigration meant that Europeans sought land. Driven in part by greed, Europeans felt a need to equally defend Christendom. The second stage of its formation was its push as a neutral state. The first written evidence of Switzerland's neutrality can be found going back to the 17th century, when mention of neutrality as an official policy of the Confederation can be found. Neutrality has been a key factor in Switzerland's history, as it meant the nation had an intention to not partake in international conflict and to protect its territory within pre-agreed terms. This decision by the Swiss government to be neutral has been a defining factor of the nation's identity since before its formation in 1848. The third and final stage in Switzerland's creation was the year 1848, when the Swiss federal constitution was approved and accepted by the Diet, or Council of the Old Confederacy. This momentous occasion marked the moment a federal authority presided over the member cantons on a number of matters, most notably foreign policy. Much like an agricultural cooperative, by uniting their resources together, they were able to efficiently allocate resources to their combined well-being. But it's important to pause here and reflect on this fact. Whilst this marked the cantons accepting a federal parliament to govern on matters of the postal service or foreign policy, the cantons and more importantly local communes maintained autonomy on matters such as local taxation and economic development. This separation and autonomy have remained somewhat unchanged since then, allowing Switzerland's economy to evolve efficiently. Resources were utilized more effectively, ensuring that local needs and wants can be solved locally, preventing a bloated government dominated by red tape and bureaucracy. Much like a lean startup or small business, processes were kept efficient. So, what then are the causes of Switzerland's economic success? In recent years, a popular narrative has emerged that Switzerland's miracle is a product of its culture. This stems from a long held belief that a Protestant work ethic encouraged hard work and a sense of communal good. Beliefs that can directly be linked to Switzerland's rich reformist history. Indeed, both Calvin and Zwingli, key pillars of the Reformation, garnered widespread support in Switzerland. Zwingli, for example, strongly believed that work was a direct reflection of divine power, almost like acts of service to God. Calvin echoed this by viewing work as a divine calling. A second and equally important line of argument put forward by commentators and historians alike states that Switzerland's success is due to its direct democracy and long history of neutrality. Any investor will tell you that uncertainty is the enemy of financial returns. Anytime a country or a region is in a state of war, it will see an exit of investor funds towards safer and more stable nations, such as Switzerland. Switzerland's political steadiness can be linked to two key factors: its neutrality and direct democracy. As we previously mentioned, the Alpine nation's neutrality dates back to at least the 17th century, but is most likely older. At the turn of the century, most European nations were victims of hyperinflation and conflict, driven primarily by the crumbling of age-old empires thanks to nationalistic fervor. Switzerland maintained its neutrality, staying out of both world wars and ensuring a stable currency. Moreover, the adoption of banking secrecy ensured an influx of billions of Swiss francs into the vaults of its banks. The nation's unique model of democracy dates back to before 1848, when the federal constitution was signed and approved. For centuries, the Swiss arranged themselves into councils that ran the affairs of states. These small areas, known as communes, were and still are responsible for issues ranging from approving new constructions to taxation. Whilst the federal parliament holds a great deal of legal power, especially when it comes to foreign and economic affairs, the everyday life of an individual is dominated by their commune and taking decisions locally. The impact of this is that the cult of personality we see in nations such as the United States of America or France is frowned upon by the Swiss. From local politics to federal policies, councils are at the heart of decision making, ensuring that ideas are debated and discussed and decisions taken for the greater good. But a key factor of direct democracy are referendums. Any Swiss citizen can launch a referendum should the necessary conditions be fulfilled, no matter how controversial the topic. If approved, These are then brought either to a local or federal vote. The people, therefore, have the final say. It's my belief that while these two factors are key, they do not explain the full story. Switzerland has always benefited from a strategic location in the center of Europe, serving as a gateway for trade. It acted as a land port for goods entering the continent in the south and making their way to France, Germany, and the Nordics. As a result, cities such as Geneva became hubs for key industries such as horology and engineering, thanks in part to its international nature, a factor that is reflected today by the United Nations' presence in the city. The story of Switzerland's miracle can also be explained by the nation's ability to innovate and diversify. In the mid to late 1800s, the canton of Basel became the hub of the dyeing industry, laying the foundations for Novartis and, of course, Roche. Located on the Swiss border with both southern Germany and eastern France, it gave the burgeoning pharmaceutical industry access to two of the most powerful economies for its export. But as we were entering the 20th century, innovation and cunning thinking allowed these companies to start manufacturing medicine, a move that has made Basel one of the world's most important centers for pharmaceuticals. Naturally, this boom in output helped the evolution of an economic cluster that supported these growing companies. The University of Basel, accounting and law firms, as well as a strong agricultural industry, all benefit but also contribute to the region's growing strength. This innovation can also be seen in one of Switzerland's most important exports, horology. While many could argue that mechanical watches are somewhat irrelevant in today's digital age, from the 17th century onwards, they were key tools used in industries ranging from warfare to naval exploration. Many have argued that the banning of jewelry by Calvin encouraged goldsmiths and jewelers alike to shift their attention to horology. By the 1800s, the focus on pendulum clocks helped bolster the nation's reputation as a center of mechanical watches and clocks. Switzerland is a complex nation made up of 4 very distinct languages and peoples. It would be very difficult to point at a single aspect to claim it's the reason for what we have come to call the Swiss miracle. Instead, it's wiser to say that Switzerland benefited from a combination of good timing, innovation, and ability to adapt to change. But if we absolutely had to, one could argue that a culture of rationality and matter-of-factness greatly contributed to becoming the nation we know it as today. Thanks for listening.